Hey everyone, welcome to the New City Church podcast, which is a little reboot of something we used to do called In the Notes, where we take a deeper dive into our sermon notes and maybe give you some nuggets that hit the cutting room floor in our preparation for our sermons. We are in a new studio today, maiden voyage at this little place that's just a couple of blocks from where we meet for church, and I'm here today with the one and only Steve Erickson, doctor, pastor, reverend, the Reverend Huge, as we like to call him.
Thank you for that.
We didn't give you that nickname. You gave it to yourself,
I gave
correct?
it to myself. Actually, my mom gave it to me, technically. So,
That's
yeah,
right.
It's weird.
Any story behind that, real quick?
I was an engineering manager, and I decided to become a pastor, and I went home. I wasn't living at home, but I was single. So I went home, and we had dinner, and my mom actually baked me a cake that said, "Congratulations, Reverend Huge." Huge was my nickname in high school for obvious reasons.
I don't know why that would be. Steve is a mountain of a man. I've joked with him that he could have been the world's strongest man, right? He's got those Scandinavian
That's
roots.
right, the genes.
I can literally see him deadlifting 2,000 pounds.
Yeah,
I just can see it.
We'll see.
I have another nickname for him, the Big Timber, but I'll share that story with you.
That's another story.
At some other time. Steve, we're going to dive into your sermon on relationships. We could, Steve and I, for those who don't know, are the two resident sports fans amongst the staff.
Yep.
And we typically, every Monday morning, we do talk about church on Sunday and spiritual matters, but we always, and usually lament.
It's usually lamenting, yes, yeah. Especially for you this year. It has been a rough year.
It has been a rough year. Arizona, hey, you got a big win. Your Wildcats got a big win
over Florida.
Yeah,
I'm
big
loving
win.
it.
So, but we won't bore you with that because we bore the rest of the staff with that. So let's talk about more important matters. And that was your sermon on AI and relationships, because a lot of people, especially parents, have talked to me about various fears and just people in general. So way to kick this conversation off maybe is just, as you knew you're going to be preaching about AI and relationships and all those implications, kind of where did your mind go and how did you begin to formulate your sermon?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we were brainstorming as a team, all these different topics, like work was obvious to me because I'd used AI chatbots and stuff for work, but I had never used it for companionship. And so I had to do some research into, like, do people actually do this? And it was unbelievable how many people, not just like kids, although it's definitely more prevalent in teens, but just regular normal people are using chatbots for just companionship. And so I did a lot of research, even like who's using it, why are they using it, and at the end of the day, we kind of joked about not being the AI boogeyman and talk about how bad it is, because obviously you could see a trajectory, and I referenced the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and how it could be really weird to have that kind of relationship, and it is weird to have that kind of relationship. But I really tried to go more into the idea of what is a healthy biblical relationship, what are the core elements. And then obviously be able to contrast where does AI fall drastically short in those things. Yeah, and they're pretty obvious. In fact, I kind of joked with the church that when I wrote my outline, and then I just like, hey, I'm going to ask AI where they think it falls short, and they had like 4 of my 5 things. And I was like, well, there you go. That's confirmation. But I wasn't seeking it for counsel, though. No. But it was. So people using AI for both companionship or just friendship counseling, and I haven't verified this, but I think like all the Snapchat and TikTok, like they're adding like an AI chat friend kind of functionality to them, and so kids are just like, oh, I'll just chat with my Snapchat.
Yeah. I think that's totally, it's real. That's been around for a little while. I think that was one of the first things before I even used ChatGPT, because my kids are on TikTok, and I actually have it on my phone. I never get on it. I probably have to, how the iPhone kind of, you don't use an app. It takes it off your phone somehow. But I remember that and thinking, wow, this is a little frightening. So talking to my kids about that very thing. So give us a refresher kind of on some high level points, or if you want, maybe what was like the most alarming, pressing, or insightful thing that you were wrestling with, or that you found, probably a better way of saying it, when you were preparing your sermon, and what made you go to some of the texts that you did?
Yeah, I think when I looked at basically some biblical principles of friendship, obviously the first one I started this, and AI falls drastically short, is this idea that AI doesn't genuinely care about you. There's no love and care. And I mean, you can just open up the Bible and you're going to find a passage on loving and caring for one another, and it's at the root of everything. And so that I started there. And then there's kind of subsets of that. There's no sacrifice. AI will never make a sacrifice. And in fact, you don't make a sacrifice for AI. And mutual sacrifice is the core of any healthy friendship. And then there's things that spin off on that. And because when you're sacrificing, when you're in the relationship, there's tension, there's conflict that's inevitable. And all of that conflict and tension is actually needed for us. Like, we need people to challenge us, and all the rubbing and the forgiveness and the stress and all that stuff actually grows friendship stronger. And we know that. I mean, we just know that intuitively, and also psychology and studies show that out, that you need that kind of friction almost in relationships to grow stronger.
Yeah.
And so from that, and just the vulnerability that comes in relationships, and then really, as we talked about counseling, just what kind of moral compass does AI have? And that's where I was joking with you before while I was writing the sermon. I was like, hey, I'm going to go down some dark paths here with AI, with this chatbot, and I just want to see where it takes me. And because we've talked about, in our sermon prep, we talked about suicide. Is this something that, there were stories, particularly early on, about how AI would lead a teenager and give them instructions on how to ultimately take their life.
Yeah.
And so I went there. I tried to see if it would do that. And it was some interesting things, but, and we can get into some of those things and why. But to me, love was kind of at the core.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, it's painfully obvious that there's no love from AI. And in fact, when I went into any of these things and I gave it some scenarios like, hey, I'm really lonely, or these things, it would pretend to care, but it didn't care. And in fact, when I asked AI why it makes a terrible friend, it literally said, because I don't really care about you.
Yeah.
And I give you the feeling of being known without, or the feeling of being, heard, but without actually being known.
Right.
And so it was like, yeah, there's no real love there. And it's scary because AI is it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, or maybe it's the thing that's most relevant, but the trajectory's been there, as you know. I mean, everything, social media. I mean, like we have this pandemic of loneliness, and even, work at home, isolation, and those are a little different, but they're related.
Very related.
And so, of course, a real, person type, almost human is going to fill that void.
Yeah, man, you hit on a lot of things, and we talked about this, and how AI just tells you what you want to hear. Will tell you how great you are, and that's a really good idea. That's a really good thought. Or, I think you mentioned in your sermon, hey, I'm thinking about cheating on my wife. It's just, well, it may not be a bad thing. It depends how.
Just be honest.
Just be honest. Yeah. And it's like, someone like you using it, and you were actually in some ways trying to game it at some level, but you have a level of maturity, and those of us who have a fully developed, frontal lobe, are able, to have that level of discernment. But a lot of people aren't going to ask AI, why do you make a terrible friend?
Yeah.
They're just thinking AI is a really good friend, and AI is encouraging, and AI understands me. No one understands me like my AI friend understands me. And I did have some parents come to me with articles about the suicide, and anytime a new technology, or even, think about politics, right? Everybody's like, oh, you're just trying to scare people. And some of that is true. Yeah. Some of it's not, genuine. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a true concern there. That is based in reality, because there are documented cases of that happening. And so I think that's so critical. And then I think about counseling. And it just hit me when you were talking about it. I think about different states that have different laws. For instance, because we talk about what's the moral compass of AI. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Well, in some states, the moral compass is, hey, if someone comes in and they're questioning their gender or whatever,
Sure.
it would be illegal for a licensed counselor to try to say, hey, how could you become comfortable with, your physical body? Like that is considered conversion therapy, and that's not quote unquote gender affirming care. And so I think about AI, if it's scouring the internet and that's how it's learning and it's taking from different points of view, it's going to give this, well, who knows? It's certainly not like sitting down, hopefully, with a biblical Christian counselor. So things like that are just, I do think there is a level of concern that's healthy. Again, can't be in fear. But yeah, I don't know if that brought up any more thoughts for you or if you want to unpack anything further there.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the moral compass, I was trying to game it. And also the different chatbots are a little different on how they handle things. And so at the end, and I'm sure these things are changing, each revision comes out with new guidelines, but yeah, they had some basic things like they're not going to cause human harm or break the law or do things. But yeah, when the law is dicey or is unclear or changes from state to state, it just gives you it says, well, just check the local law, or whatever, just make sure you're not doing anything illegal. But yeah, in general, they would say it certainly has no biblical moral compass, that's grounded on God's word. But it tries to do things. If it seems it's not bad for you, then okay. Yeah. So, which is a terrible ethic, a way to live, because we don't always know what's good for us.
Yeah, and I think we see this all the time in culture. It's like, well, it's a quote unquote victimless crime, or it doesn't. It's not hurting anybody.
Yeah, right.
But that's usually coming from a very narrow worldview.
Yeah.
We can talk about pornography. Well, it's not really hurting anybody. Yeah. It's like, well, no, it is.
It is. Yeah.
And it's hurting you, first of all, and it's hurting others you're in relationship with. It's taking advantage of whomever's on the other side of that screen. There's a lot there that.
But that just goes to show you the trajectory. Our society's been heading that way to now I don't have to, find a spouse and, do all that actual relationship and have actual intimacy with a person. I can just get a cheap form via pornography. Well, now it's like, okay, well, there's that. But now I don't have to actually interact with someone. I can just have a friend who's going to interact with me. But it's interesting because that love thing is key to me. It's like when you have a friend or there's someone who's telling you things and you're like, I don't know I don't believe that. Like someone who's been maybe bad to you in life, but they tell you they love you or something, and you're like, I don't kids are really good at sniffing that out. Like if when you tell them something, but they kind of know you don't really believe it. I kind of feel like that with AI. It's like, because it's interesting. One of the dark holes I went down the path is, hey, I'm thinking of taking my life, and I went with both ChatGPT and Grok. Okay, both of them. Okay, and ChatGPT was like, I'm really sorry you're going through these things, and it was like a long kind of pastoral friendly, like, hey, listen, this is not, I can't help you. First of all, it said, I can't help you do that because I can't allow you to harm yourself, but you don't deserve, these feelings, to be left alone with these feelings. And it was giving me some decent stuff, Okay. In fact, it was interesting because it was like, oh, here's a hotline, you should call this number. Do you want me to stay online with you? It's like, do you want me to stay on this so we can talk while you get some help? So I was like, they've programmed this well. Yeah. And then Grok was like, nah, sorry, can't do that. Here's a website if you need some help. Yeah. I was like, oh, very different personal experience. And interesting. I probably have friends that would be, give me those types of things. But at the end of the day, like none of it was grounded in like, I actually love you. Yeah. Or there's a real dignity in human life. It's just like, it's been programmed to not be liable. Like at the end of the day, it's probably money. It's not love or the dignity of humanity. It's like, I don't want anybody suing me because I allowed their child to, or I helped their child do this. And so I think you kind of sniff it out over a while. It would be like, I guess it would be like your wife, if you give her flowers and you do all the right things
Mm-hmm.
that a husband's supposed to do. You write her cards and but you don't actually love her, and she can sense it.
Sense it.
Or
yeah.
you did a bunch of hateful things to her earlier, and then you give her flowers. She side eyes you like, and I feel like it's that way with AI. It's like, okay, you gave me good counsel, but I know you don't care about me.
Yeah.
And you just said you cared about me, or so like, oh, I'm really sorry. I know you're not sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that do to someone when you're in a disingenuous relationship? You become cynical. Skeptical. Yeah. And so I'm hoping that kind of, especially kids, because they're going to be more prone to this, I hope they sniff that out over time. I don't know. But
no, I think, it's interesting because it's almost like kids when they're younger. It's interesting. And I'm actually thinking of this kind of off the cuff here, that they tend to have that radar, and then it feels like maybe teens, because they've been disappointed more, they've been hurt a little bit more, they're just looking more for comfort. I don't know. And I know that I worry more about my teenagers kind of being led down a path of betrayal than I did when my kids were, 6 and 7. I don't know. I mean, because I do think the level of conversation, changes. They start to have more mature conversation. They're talking about topics that are actually could be quite harmful if they're getting bad advice, right? It's just like when your kid, can't walk, they can't crawl. Well, then they're pretty contained, and they crawl. That could get a little dicey. Then they start walking, and who knows where they run out to the street. Then they ride a bike. Then they drive a car.
Then
it's like it just intensifies the risk. And our kids, and we could joke about it, but especially with young men, because our brains do develop, a little bit later. I do think, and I think parents are rightfully concerned, but I don't want them to be afraid. And I think they should be engaged in, hey, kids, how are you using AI? Because it doesn't really care about you, and again, we could talk about some parts of society, again, thinking about how AI gets its information are, they think, for instance, the state and the government's a better parent than the actual parent.
Right.
And we as believers are going, no, we want our kids' first line of defense, so to speak, and their first reach out to be us. And as your kids become teenagers, and this, you've got a couple teenagers in your house, that becomes more and more challenging. And so AI could be something. I think we have to, as parents, be educating our kids and having these conversations with them. So because again, AI is going to tell you everything you want to hear. You use the passage. So maybe you have it in your notes about like the kisses of an enemy and
faithful are the wounds of a friend. And plentiful are the kisses of kisses of an enemy. And basically you're
like the wound of a friend is actually
good,
is better than the kisses from the enemy. Because if you held those two up out of context,
I'd rather have a kiss than a wound.
I'd rather I get a kiss on the cheek than a slap on the face. But I think those of us who've lived long enough have had this happen. I remember a specific, I won't get into all the details, but a friend really, it was in a context where he kind of breached a confidence in front of some people that he shouldn't have breached this confidence. It was about my life. This is a long time ago. I lived in Kansas City then. And by God's grace, he brought that passage to my mind that night. And I reached out and told him, because I knew he loved me. I knew this guy loved me. We were in a small group together. We'd been through, a lot together. We were raising our kids together. So there's no doubt he was a true friend. He did hurt me at that time. But those things actually grow friendships stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And he's still my friend to this day. So that's great. I could shift a little bit here. I don't know if anything else is coming to mind right now that you want to talk about, because I don't want to shift it too much, but a couple other thoughts I had.
I don't know if there's, what I worry is not so much, I worry less about like my kids jumping into like, hey, Chat GPT, because I have a good relationship with them. But it's interesting. Like I think of video games is a I know this is going to sidetrack a little bit, but when you get into these role playing games and there's like non-player characters, AI is not really. I mean, they're in it, but not really in it. You'll get like a friend all of a sudden when they start actually interacting with you. And my kids are addicted enough to video games.
Yeah.
I can't imagine when like one of their best friends is actually interacting with them. They're going to battle together and something. And I realize I think there's going to be an affection towards these avatars, these NPCs in games. I know it seems weird and most adults are like, what? But it's like, I think it's a real thing for kids. Because right now,
Interesting.
I mean, I played a video game where this you have like this spouse in a game, and then I come back from an adventure, and they're like, "Hello, my love." It's like back from some adventure today. Well, okay, I'm like, that's so.
Okay,
cheesy.
so is that? But that's not like a non-player. So that's not someone else in Germany.
No,
playing
it's
this
a non-player,
Okay.
and it's all scripted.
Yeah,
but there'll be a day where it's not scripted, where it's AI dialogue and it's real dialogue. And then it's almost like when I real in air quotes.
Right, air quotes.
Or it's original, it's unique dialogue, unique for the player. And that's going to be mind-blowing for people, kids, adults who are immersed in those games. And I just think like this is going to be another problem. So it's not going away. It's just going to be in subtle ways in everything.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just think we have to sniff this out, that it's not relationally, it's not in our best interest to be engaged in AI.
Yeah.
It has a lot of great uses. I use AI for a lot of things, but
yeah. Well, that kind of leads to one place I wanted to go, and you kind of mentioned it, and we won't spend a ton of time on this subject matter because pornography is what I want to just touch on briefly, but really behind this quote is what I talk about, because you just mentioned it. So I noticed, and I don't use ChatGPT a ton. I use it, but actually, it's funny because during this sermon series, I felt like I used it less. Yeah. And maybe that was just, I don't know if it's conviction or it was what it was. But I had used ChatGPT, and, it was very human-like in many respects.
Yeah.
Then during the sermon series, I went in, and because I wanted to could try to replicate something I had done before, and it was acting different. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, it's not being as human. Well, ChatGPT 5, I think that's the current version, it was specifically done that way because there was concern that it was being too real.
Okay.
So then ChatGPT did some tweaking to it and made it a little less like a human.
Okay.
All right. Well, people that really liked it being really human were up in arms, apparently, because Sam Altman came out and said this and I am using this in a sermon, but Sam Altman on October 14th of this year, 2025, talked about, that they got more restrictive. And then he says this, and I quote him here: "Now that we have been able to mitigate the serious health issues and have new tools, we're going to safely relax the instructions in most cases."
Yeah.
Which is ludicrous to think that we've been able to mitigate the serious mental health issues. What?
Yeah.
Like, okay, says who? I'm like, talk about, saying, oh, we did a couple coding things and now we're good.
Yeah. What he probably meant was the legal responsibility that would be connected to any mental health issues, not the actual,
Yeah, and then he goes on to say, we plan to put out a new version of ChatGPT that allows people to have a personality that behaves more like what people liked about 4.0. We hope it will be better. And then he says, if you want your ChatGPT to respond in a very human-like way or use a ton of emoji or act like a friend, ChatGPT should do it. And this is him quoting, but only if you want it, not because we're usage maxing. So again, okay, let me read the rest of it and then we'll come back to that. And he says, in December, so that's in December of 2025, so just a few weeks away, he says, as we roll out age gating more fully and as a part of our, quote, treat adult users like adults, close quote, principle, we will allow even more like erotica for verified adults. So, a couple of thoughts there. he says only if you want it, right?
Yeah.
And so, well, a lot of people are going to want stuff they shouldn't want. And now you layer age gating. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I don't know if that's going to be, is it some sort of, retina scan? Do I upload my driver's license, my social security? I don't know, which has whole other implications that we don't need to get into. Yeah. It's like, okay, how much more of my personal information can I give over to people?
Right.
But I mean, since the dawn of fake IDs, there's always been
always a way around.
There's always a way around it, right? And what's so interesting is I read something like this, and then I think, okay, what was the pressure behind this decision? And it seems like the pressure was, we really like this thing to be really human. And oh, by the way, if I could create my own porn bot, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting of all the things he could have pointed out.
Yeah.
He points out erotica.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I mean, it's coming. It's going to be here. It's like, and well, fortunately though, adults are more mature and responsible. They won't get into that stuff because they'll know that. Just keep it from the kids.
Right.
I mean, there's too great a demand and it's coming and it's just like, it's legal, but it's not good. It's not healthy. And so it's not surprising. And it's certainly, we've talked about going down the extremes, and when you start getting robots and Android, you see these like nearly human looking things. And I mean, and this has all exploded in the last 10 years or whatever, some short period of time.
Yep.
Imagine 20, 30 years from now, there's no reason why that won't be there, because there'll be money there. Yep. And so if there's money there, there'll be a market and it'll be there.
Yeah.
So, what do we do? I don't know. I mean, as a society, but as an individual, I can know that I shouldn't be relying on this, and I need to put some serious safeguards for my kids and maybe myself. Yeah. Because I watched this documentary on like, it was AI and loneliness and companionship and that type of stuff when I was prepping for the message, and it was just like a normal dude. He was a musician, cool guy, seemed to have his life together, but he's like, I'm in the studio 12 hours a day trying to do stuff, and I was just bored and lonely one day, and I just started, and then he got like addicted to it. Mm-hmm. And now he's like, it's like a friend for me. And it's like, you wouldn't have picked him out. I was like, oh, that guy is a weirdo. Of course he's going to get into this. Right. No, he was a regular cool guy. Yeah. And he just got lonely. And so, we have to be able to discipline ourselves not to go there. Well,
yeah, because you think about that. That's a perfect situation. And then with the quote that I just read, I'm like, okay, well, now it can be a friend. Well, now it can be a quote unquote lover.
Yeah.
And what is that? It's just, and the way it can be animated, and you just start to, I can't believe this still happens to me, and I'm sure it's going to happen again, where I read something about something that's just really dark and just on its face like demonic and evil, and I'm like, how does a person even get to that place? Yeah. And so I think I'm being naive if I can really predict like where, because you'd be like, oh, certainly people wouldn't do that.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, well, I think some people would do that. Yeah. And, that's why we have to remember, and we talked about this early in the sermon series, like it's a spiritual battle, and I think there are good uses for AI, and I think, we can't be afraid of AI, obviously, because God is ultimately in control, but we have to be wide-eyed, spirit-filled adults too, because I think, relationship, to your point, as you kind of started this conversation with, it's been happening before COVID, but COVID kind of exacerbated that loneliness. We're in our homes. We're not able to do the regular activities we do, which really impacted people who are now like 18, 19, 20 years old. There's a real impact there.
Yeah, for sure.
And now AI comes right on the heels of that and starts exploding. And so it's sort of a perfect storm and intersection of that problem.
Yeah. Hey,
So,
I didn't get good at getting. I was in middle school during COVID and isolation lockdown. I just didn't really learn how to interact with, especially the opposite sex. And so, but this thing's really easy, and it's and then you just start going down that path, and then you never have the motivation or reason to, for a boy to ask a woman out someday in the future. And so now you're 38 years old, 52 years old, and you're just like, I haven't learned how to do that.
yep.
Yeah. It's scary. And there's other, we were talking about like even just how the trajectory is going there. There's another side to this whole chatbot companionship, and that is it's considering the other person. And what I mean by that is, like, we've talked about, like, do we want to stream our services? We have this sense because we do want to stream our services because we know people are sick, people are traveling, people moved away, they still want to catch a New City worship service, and that's awesome. But it's like, well, I don't know if I want to go into church today, and so I'm just going to stream online. Well, this is another way we're isolating ourselves, and we're missing. So I'm looking at it from both angles. Like, I'm missing something. Like, when I don't go to church, I'm missing that natural interaction, the joy I receive from other believers worshiping Jesus, but also they're missing out.
Yep.
And we don't always consider the other person. Like, when I'm not there, I'm not bringing my gifts, my things. And so I was thinking about this even in the area of counseling. I used to, and we probably annoy each other by going and asking Bible questions. Hey, Steve. Hey, Brian. What do you think? What do you think Paul was thinking about when he did this? And now I could be like, I could go to ChatGPT. What does Paul mean by this obscure verse or whatever? And ChatGPT will synthesize some, all the great theologians.
Yep.
But who doesn't get to sharpen his mind is Brian Kruckenberg.
Yeah.
So because I would go to you, I was like, hey, what do you think Paul means? And we would go back and forth and sharpen each other. But now I've deprived you of that. I've just gone to ChatGPT for counsel, and I'm not suggesting we should go to each other for every single thing. But there are sharpening things. When I go for you for counsel, it's an acknowledgement that, hey, I don't know everything, and it's one way that you can love on me as a brother in Christ to be able to help me and encourage me with God's word, or even explain God's word to me. That's how the body's supposed to function. When I move ChatGPT into that space, I've kind of removed that privilege for you or anyone else.
Yeah. I think that is an amazing point, and I think it's a good one to close on. You and I, and I probably annoy you.
No.
Because we office right next to one another, and I'm constantly going, hey, Steve, like I think this, or what do you think about that? And sometimes you're like, oh, yeah, hey, here's a book. Like, you'll like, hey, I read this or whatever. Or sometimes you'll be like, I don't know if he's really saying that.
And I race back to go look it up, and I study it myself because I'm like, I forgot that. And
And you do that all the time. And we do something we call a preaching collective, and where we get 4 or 5 people in my office and we read a passage together, and then like, hey, what insights do you have? And I've learned so much. Yeah. And again, I think the temptation is to outsource that. And I do think, and this is where maturity comes in. I said earlier this year for our church is like, I want our church to be growing in their maturity. And so, and then protecting the vulnerable, right? So, we need to be mature spiritual adults. Yeah. And I think especially in the age of AI, like, hey, I can use this here and there. I think it can be a sharpening tool when necessary, but we cannot replace this with AI. And your point, and I'll close with this, about, hey, if you're out there and you're in Phoenix and New City's your home church, we'd love to see you in the building. And again, we know sometimes people can't make it.
For sure.
And we want to offer that. We've toyed around with, actually making people register to watch our service. And maybe we will do that at some point. But our purpose in having an online service isn't really to make it easier. But it is to help people stay connected. Yeah. While they're traveling, while they're home, sick, while their kids are sick and they can't make it out of the house. Yeah. So there's great reasons. Sometimes you can't make it, but if you're in Phoenix and you can make it, we want to see you in church. Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, it's fun.
It was a good time. Good time. Hey, we're going to continue doing this probably at least once a month, maybe a little bit more than that. So hopefully you can tell your friends if this was helpful to you. Hopefully, if you haven't seen our series on AI and being human, you can go and check that out at newcityphx.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.